Europeans, Europeans and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So first, I'm going to talk a little about myself. I identify as a gay male, and recently, just like 2 weeks ago, when Eric asked me to do the hosting for this amazing event, like a few days before, I actually came out to my entire family about my sexuality, and it was my family's very religious, so it was a very tough thing to do, and it worked out really well. They gained knowledge on the topic and they communicated with me, and now it's been better than ever, and I'm more closer to everyone. And it was, although I was very scared at the beginning, it's only getting better and better. So I'm really, that's why I was really excited to host this event, because like it's a very important issue for me. And now that I can openly be who I am even at my house, it's very I'm becoming very passionate about the topic, and I would like to discuss more about it with everyone, and especially when it comes to the business world, because I believe like the business term professional does not account for all type doesn't not account for all people identifying as whoever they want, because like if you even if you search up professionally dressed or professional people on Google search, all the results come up are for cisgender people, all for people who don't represent our community as openly as our community should be represented, as we are part of the business world, just like we are part of the arts world and any other uh, community in the entire world. And being part of the business world is really important for me, especially to be represented for who I am, instead of people always assuming me to be a straight male just because if I dress in like business casual, because business casual does not really account for people in our community, which it should, because like people in our community, we don't just identify as a different sexual orientation than the mainstream heterosexual. We can also be part of so many other communities like the business world, and it should be something that's more normalized than it actually is. And especially like being a business student and being from a religious family and being a gay male, the first gay male in my entire family out of everyone, it's very important for me to be representing myself, because being part of so many different communities, I really believe that I want to be represented and I want people to know who I am, instead of me having to hide it for the sake of professionalism. And that's all I have to say about myself. So first, I'll be introducing the TRPA, uh, Megan. Megan, her, is entering her second year in the business management program. She's majoring in global management studies and is currently the VP of corporate relations at Ted Rogers Pride Alliance. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Hamza. Thank you so much for the introduction. So, also thank you for inviting me to be a speaker at today's event. I was told that we are just going to speak kind of sometimes where we felt singled out. So, I I had to share the story with some of my friends at TRPA, and they thought it was very interesting, and that's the one I want to share today. And it's not so much about coming out, but it's more so about when you sometimes are yourself and you're strong and you're confident and you're a woman, you can intimidate a man in the workplace, and then they try to put you in a category so it makes sense to them. And this happened in my very first job. I was the receptionist, and within maybe 2 months of being the receptionist, it was pretty obvious that I had some skills when it came to sales. So the president of the company, he was very supportive, and he put me into the role of sales, and I had a product that I had to sell, but at the same time, I had to maintain all my duties as a receptionist. So I kind of had to prove myself, which is something that now I feel like that's kind of unfair, because I was obviously someone who was going to excel in the role, but I just had to prove myself and still do my receptionist role. But I did. And during that time, I had a colleague who was a salesperson. And he came up to me one day while I was working on my second job. And it was very important, the work I was doing at the time. But he felt like he needed to tell me at that moment how to help me order milk and cream so we wouldn't run out of milk and cream when we make coffee. And he saw what I was working on, and I told him like, this is not important. And for today's purpose, we'll call him John. And I said, John, do you see what I'm doing right now? I can't make that my priority right now. And we had a little till that had money, and I literally pulled out $10 and I gave to him. I'm like, here, go buy milk and coffee, milk and cream yourself. And he literally asked me at that moment, he's like, are you a lesbian? And I was like, what? And it just kind of like, I was completely speechless because two things crossed my mind immediately was, are you trying to insult me by saying that? And why is that insult? And also, why did he decide that that was a word he felt like calling me? It was very confusing. And I actually didn't respond to him. I was really quiet and I just said, nothing actually, and he walked away. And I remember getting up from my desk right away and going to speak to President, who was very supportive of me. And he kind of sat me down, he calmed me down, and I told him what happened and how it happened. And he basically said to me, you're going to have to accept this is going to happen to you a lot in your career. He said, when you are going into positions that a lot of men are in, they may feel intimidated by you, and this is something you're just going to have to deal with. And that was the part that I shared with my tutor. They kind of started telling me, well, isn't that weird? And after when actually Kira and Masa started telling me, well, that's weird, I didn't realize it was weird actually, that it was something that I had to accept, because I did, to be honest, I do accept that. And I do accept when men especially, they have a hard time seeing me in authority role. And most of my positions are in management, and in doing so, sometimes it takes me a long time to build a relationship with them. And I feel like sometimes I have to participate in appropriate jokes to build their trust and to build their peership, because if I don't, then they'll start singling me out and I'll lose their respect. So sometimes like I've gone along with that behavior where it's something I feel like I shouldn't have accepted. And only like now I'm kind of like refocusing and reflecting and realizing, if I do that, I become part of that problem, and I've kind of completely started changing the way I'm thinking, like moving forward, because I don't think it's something we should have to accept if we want to be, a strong, confident person who's capable of doing the work and being female and identifying as female, but having a man feel like it's important for him to kind of belittle you and kind of say, well, you're this way because this is who you are. And to be honest, I think ever since then, I've been really confused myself about my own sexuality. Like, I've been like single forever. I know I've seen way too much. How many people's on here? 30? Right? So like, like I think it has kind of like confused me in a way, and I really focused on work. But like, I mean, that job was amazing to me. And because of that, I've gotten to the point where right now I'm doing a Bachelor of Commerce. So I was one of those people who went straight to work, right? And it took me going into that career realizing, well, I actually can't move up in this career unless I have a degree, because if I don't and I keep doing it, I'm going to end up getting cut down every time by either somebody's comment deciding they're going to identify me as one way, or completely just being, and I think this happens probably to a lot of people who are qualified, you completely are overlooked if you don't have a certain degree. So that's why I decided I was going to continue and do my Bachelor of Commerce, so I can have that degree, because I kind of was put into the role to realize like, this is my perfect job. This is something I can do. I am definitely someone who loves not only leading a team, but I love creating marketing campaigns. Already like one of my first projects, Meagan, you're like the most amazing. That's why I always loved calling you boss, because you're so supportive of me. But like right away, as soon as I came, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to change the signature. Oh my gosh, should I do this? It's marketing's job, right? And it's like, I just love that I can able to like work with people who understand me and know that I'm not trying to step on toes. I'm not trying to be somebody who's aggressive and being identified as being someone who's aggressive, and that's why you're successful. I thought it was really unfair. So that's my story, and I know it's an open forum. I'm not sure if you guys want to share comments or, and I'm not the host, Hamza. Please take back over and tell me what happens next. Yeah.
Uh, that was a story that I can actually relate to very well because like from being in Ted Rogers, I've always received immense support about who I am, and like no matter what I tell people, they always have no problem with it. They always are very cool with this. That's why I love Ryerson so much because of the open community. But
Yes.
also like in the business world, like very few times I've attended workshops or like conferences or been in a position where I'm surrounded by like straight businessmen, uh, it's also felt kind of like condescending on me in a way that like I can like see them making judgments about who I am just because of my pride socks or my pride pin or something that I decorate my suit or stuff with. Like although like I've received immense support from Ryerson outside of Ryerson whenever I attend any event, it's always like they don't believe the position I am in because of who I identify as, in a way that they believe that the way they talk is very condescending in a way that they believe that they could have gotten the position in a much easier way. And I agree, I agree that people could have gotten the position, but I also agree that I work really, really hard for what I do in life, and I don't believe that anyone has the right to tell me what I should be doing just because of who I identify as, or in a way that people adjust the way they're speaking to me just because of who I am, in a way that, uh, of course, like sometimes people are more comfortable with who I am, which I appreciate a lot that people feel comfortable around me, but also in a way that's like sometimes when I'm talking to people, I can tell that who I am makes them uncomfortable, and if they can respect it, I don't mind it. But sometimes people, the way that they tell you something to do, or the way that they ask you to like the way they ask you to do something, the way they talk to you, it can be condescending in a way that you can tell that they don't believe that you should be at the place you are because of who you are meant to be. In a way that I've had a lot of people tell me that I don't belong in the business world, I belong in the arts or like philosophy or English just because of who I am, and it's believed like, oh, we're better at the arts and we can be like commerce or marketing, in a way that like also sometimes when I tell people that people ask me what I'm doing in business and I tell them I'm doing marketing, they go like, oh, as if they understand why I'm doing marketing just because of who I am, just because more of a creative side of the business world. So I relate very closely to that story because I've had experiences like those myself. And I encourage any of you attending this conference to keep your cameras open if you're comfortable and add to the discussion if you have something to say as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, sorry, hey Hamza, I have something to add to that. So, just in the past, like, and I'm sure you probably like heard of it, but I just find that there's a very like weird stigma, and this is kind of coming from this like things I hear from my guy friends or just other like males or even some females. Sometimes it's kind of just like there there's some sort of fear of just even just talking and having a conversation about anything, and then the community is quite often discredited just because of who you are, which is wrong, right? And I just can't quite understand why people who, in this case, for my own experiences, these people are quote unquote not supportive of the community, but at the same time they have a lot of commentary, right? So I could never really understand why people would want to focus on the negatives, and they really just overemphasize it if they don't support it, if that makes sense, right? And it's just unnecessary. And so I'm really glad that you took this platform to share that. Sorry, I just wanted to add that comment.
Yeah, thank you. And like same thing happened last year. I attended this conference and it was one of the first conference I attended. So it was my first time meeting people at like Ryerson too. And like first thing whenever people find out who I am is like most people like are very, very supportive of it. And then over time, like the jokes start, which are very lighthearted, and I'm obviously like I don't mind them at all. But then I've had like as a gay Muslim person of color, I've had lots of people call me like a major minority or like a minority like of like the highest level because of how many minorities I'm in. And although people don't realize that like it's a little like it affects people a little bit saying calling them that because like sounds like it sounds like you're condescending me in a way, or like disregarding what I have to say because I am part of so many minorities, and because the business world is not usually uh for it's not the majority of the business world is not someone who is from so many different minorities in a way that sometimes people don't find me like professional because like of who I am, and I when at job interviews or when they find out who I am, they say oh as if like it explains stuff about about like the way I act when when even if I'm trying if even if I'm being professional in the business environment, or like it's like it disregards what who I am just because of it regards what I'm doing just because of who I am, and I don't agree with that at all because what I do should not be defined by what I am. Like in a way that uh goes back to like the jokes and stuff. Like sure, like people who I'm comfortable with, they can make jokes with me as long as they're lighthearted and I know who they are. But when I meet new people and they joke about who I am in the business world as if they know my entire life story and they know who I am and they know what I'm doing, and I can tell that they're saying it lightheartedly. It's not always communicated the same way, and I feel like people should be more careful about what they're saying in a way that not everything they say is as countable as they believe it to be, especially to someone that they're speaking it to.
Actually, I know my time's done, but I have a really quick one that it's actually just about identity too. But one of the things that actually really bothers me, like on a day-to-day basis, is I'm biracial. I'm Trinidadian, and because I look more like one race, I'm always forced to be that race. People expect that type of behavior from me, and I don't know how many other people are here biracial. And it, when you are, they expect if you look more black, if you look more Indian, if you look more white, then that's who you are, and that's how you have to behave. And when you don't, or you try to oppose their view and say, well, no, I can't completely relate to those ideals of that culture because I'm a bit of both, they can't accept it. And I'm actually Trinidadian, and my ancestors are at some points, some of them were from India, and I personally find I have the hardest time with Indian people not accepting myself. And sometimes it's like the people you look like the most are the ones who judge you the hardest. And that's something I wanted to share. I'm done.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I agree with that too. Like people the first thing people should realize before trying to make themselves more knowledgeable and respectful about us is that like we had to go through it all first before they found out. Like we had to come to terms with our sexuality. We had to come to terms with who we are and what we want to do and what we are in the business world and how the people expect us to behave in a way that we know the things that they're feeling because we also felt it at one point, and we know the way that some people think it was because some of us also thought it was in that way before, and it has been more of a process to us than it shows, especially as like in my case, by the time I went to Ryerson and started my business degree, I was very confident and very comfortable with who I am, and in a way that people thought that people think that just because I'm very comfortable with who I am and confident, they can say what they want and it won't affect me. But people don't know how many old wounds or old things that can be opened up just because from their words or the way they expect me to behave or the way that the things they expect me to be doing with my time instead of like the things I want to be doing. Like there's expectations on who we are just because of the expectations on what we should be doing just because of who we are, which I don't believe that there should be, because we can do anything we want and no one can put, and only we are allowed to identify as who we want to be and do what we want to do, and people can't really expect stuff from us that doesn't align with our views. Like I respect everyone's views and I believe everyone has different views, but you can't put your views on someone just because you think that it normalizes it. Like, I don't believe that just because you don't think of me as normal, that I'm not normal, because I know who I am. I struggle with it. I've worked hard to get to the point that I am at, and I am going to make a place in the business world. And I'm just saying it, like, I know that I'm going to make a place in the business world, and people who have been condescending in the past or telling me things or expecting things from me, they have no opinion on what I can do, because I know I can do so much more than they expect me to be doing. And with that, I want to move on to our second speaker, Mehregan. He is entering second year business management program and is majoring in marketing. And Mehregan is the president of the Tejarted Pride Alliance.
Thank you so much. Let me make sure I'm not on mute. Okay, no. My name is Mehregan, as Hamza mentioned. Thank you so much for everyone who's joining us today. I'm very excited for this call. I've been looking forward to it for a long time, and I'm very excited to be here and speaking. I actually wasn't planning on speaking about professionalism, but as it was mentioned, I really feel passionate about it, as I'm sure most of us are. But that was one of my main concerns entering business management. I'm a second year student, so I'm talking about last year. It was pretty recent, but I was very concerned about fitting in or finding any friends who had the same passion, let's say, as me, interests as me. I had a really hard time in making my decision whether or not I should go into arts, even though I was interested in arts, but I wanted to study. I wanted to study business. I wanted to explore that side of me as well, and I really felt anxious doing it. And when entering Ted Rogers, I feel like as soon as I heard about TRPA, it really resonated with me, and I wanted to get involved with them. And it's been the best decision I made because that definitely really helped me to be more comfortable going to school every day, being more comfortable being myself in attending events, because I do want to dress differently sometimes. I do want to not wear a navy blue suit. I do want to wear different colors of suit that it's not normal. It's not considered professional, as you mentioned. And I'm very passionate about changing that. And I mean, not changing that, but helping to change that eventually. And I feel like one of the things that we're working on, thanks to the team that is here right now, we're planning to do a lot of things that help other students who feel the same way, who want to be in the business world, but not necessarily dress the way that they're supposed to be dressed, or get jobs that they're supposed to get in a corporate world. Not necessarily because you study business, you have to work at a bank. There are so many jobs, businesses, very versatile, and you can always relate it to anything that you are passionate about. So I really wanted to share that, but that wasn't my main speech at all. I'm sorry if I'm gonna go out of my time limit. I just wanted to add that. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about my past and growing up. So I'm originally from Iran, and as some of you know, Iran is one of the very few countries that still punishes homosexuality and with death penalty. And growing up, knowing that and fearing that was a big part of me. I was always afraid of that, like knowing that my life could be possibly taken away from me just for simply being myself, was terrible. It's the best word to describe it. And I think that really affected going to school every day, being treated differently by teachers, by family members, by friends, just for being different. And I feel like as I started growing older and going to high school, I was there until I was 17. And I actually just recently moved here, which I will get to that. But so until I was 17, and I feel like as I started entering high school, a lot of people started giving me more serious advices, just like telling me, for example, teachers or family members started telling me that if you don't start acting like other boys, or if you don't start dressing like other normal boys, you wouldn't be able to get you wouldn't be able to get jobs, you wouldn't be able to get hired, because not all companies want to work with someone who's different, someone who wants to act differently, wants to have different opinions, or not all teams want to have a team member who looks like you. Or I would get a lot of comments saying that not all girls want to be with someone who looks like you. And little did they know that I had no interest in wanting to work with any of those companies, and I had nothing in common with those girls other than the fact that they were looking for the same thing as I was looking for. But I was fortunate enough to escape that place at the age of 17, and I feel like I always, before moving here, I always dreamed of this better future for myself, this life that I was always dreaming of. But the dream that I always had didn't involve any of those things in here. Like, I thought none of these things would ever happen here. I thought this is just heaven. Like, I thought that like all those things were there, and this is just a perfect place for me to live. But I feel like as I started working here, one of the experiences that I wanted to share today was the first jobs that I got was at Tim Hortons. I was just working at Tim Hortons after high school. I was just going there, and then I was asked to one of the jobs that I had was to unload boxes, just like the frozen donuts, bagels, and everything. I would put them away, and then later on, I was asked to also help with the unloading when the truck comes. And I started doing that for a long time, even though I hated it. It was such a hard labor for me to do, but I just didn't want to say anything. I wanted to be nice, and I didn't know all my rights. So I just started doing it. But then after a few months, my manager once called me and said that, you know what, you don't have to do it anymore. And I was like, oh, did you hire someone? Like, is everything okay? Like, are you sure? And she was like, yeah. And she started Googling, and I was like, is everything okay? Is anything wrong? And she was like, yeah, I just think that you're a bit too soft for it. And I was like, what does that mean? And she was like, no, this is not my comment. The guy who drives the truck and who helps you deliver says that you're just a little too soft. And I just started asking questions. I was like, what does that mean? I didn't really get offended, because I thought this is just heaven here. I thought nothing happens here. Everyone accepts me. Everyone loves me for who I am. I didn't think that she was actually making fun of me. And then she brought her hand up, and she was like, he just said that you're a little too this for unloading boxes. And I was like, oh, but in that moment, I feel like I didn't say anything, because again, I thought these things don't happen. Like, because of all the progress that we've made, I thought these things don't happen here. But it did, and I didn't say anything up until a few years later, as I started sharing it with my my friends and family, and I was like, this isn't okay. Like, I need to start, like, people need to start talking about these things, because these things do happen here as well. Maybe not as harsh as the way that they happen back home, but they still do happen. And I feel like the reason that I wanted to share this is to emphasize on the fact that as incredible the progress that we've made here is, we really need to know that these things, these small comments, small, big, these comments really affect someone's feelings and the way that they think of themselves, especially young kids out there. We really need to be careful with the way we make comments, with the comments that we make, with the especially with the pronouns. We really need to be aware of that and know that these things could hurt someone. And also say that these things, again, do happen. We shouldn't ignore the progress. It's been incredible, but we have a long way to go, and there's still so much more that we can do to make this world, make this community a better place for everybody, where everyone feels accepted and feels appreciated for who they are. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Actually have a story very, very similar to that. So I grew up in
Yeah.
Pakistan, till I was 8 years old. And Pakistan, of course, like I knew that I was gay back then, but no one like I didn't know it was a real thing at all. Like I just thought like, oh, I'm like this is a new thing that I created. That's literally what my mindset at that time. And then at 8 years old, I came to Canada, and I remember in grade 6 was the first time that my teacher read like a storybook about the two gay penguins and how they hatched an egg together. And I'm pretty sure so many of you have read that story in school. And then me and my teacher in the class, we had a discussion about like homosexuality. And the only thing I was 10 I was 11 years old at the time, and the only thing I got from the entire discussion was that gay is a slur. That's the only thing I learned from the entire thing. Like I didn't even learn that gay meant homosexuality. I didn't learn that gay meant like who like that's who I am. I didn't learn that it's okay. All I learned from the entire lecture was that it's a slur. That it's a slur, which is not even a slur. So I believe that like the school system is not good at all at teaching people about like homosexuality and about different sexualities and about gender and everything like that in a way that when I came to Canada, I grew up in a very like it was a immigrant was the majority of the population where I grew up, and which means that most of the immigrants were also from Pakistan themselves. So they were very religious, they were very cultural, they were very traditional in a way that until I came to Ryerson, I did not feel accepted in any community. Like in my high school, I had like three friends, all girls, because all the guys in my high school everywhere were uncomfortable with me. And to the point where I had this one story of this guy friend that I had for all throughout high school, and he was very nice the entire time. But then later on, near high school's ending, so me and my friends we would go to like the Christmas market for winter and other event and places and stuff like that. And then when I'll be walking beside him in this large group of students, and my hand will like brush against his, he would push me and say, "Oh my God, that's so gay," and I thought that was normal until I grew up a little more and learned more about it. I thought it was okay, that's how people are gonna react their entire life. Like people are gonna be uncomfortable with who I am. People are going to make comments, make remarks, and call me ill or gross. And that was just so normal to me until I came to Ryerson, until I met all these new people who are so accepting of who I am in a way that I remember when I went to the DECA conference last year, my roommate, he was this amazing, my best friend named Stefan, and the first thing I told him was, I'm gay because we were sharing a bed. I don't know, like, people have all been uncomfortable, like, brushing their hand against me. So I had to tell him that. So I told him that I'm gay and did not change anything in his opinion. He was, it did not even affect how he looked at me. It didn't affect that we shared a bed the entire time. It didn't affect like the way he treated me. He treated me like a human being. He talked to me about everything I wanted to talk about. He was very, very respectful. So that was my first experience with having a guy friend that at Ryerson. And it just made me so much more secure about who I am, so much more confident with who I am. And then it's always just been going up from there. Like for instance, like when Eric asked me to host this event, I was very, very happy to host it because I felt like I was getting people were appreciating me for who I am and not like using it as like a way to call me out. People were treating me in the way that I wanted to be treated, and people were giving me respect and asking for my views on such topics, which I'm very, very happy to give. So it was a very, very nice experience coming from such a conservative environment to Toronto, to Ryerson, because I see so many more people like me, and every single person I've met at Ryerson has been very, very accepting, and their opinions haven't changed about me ever. And it's just I love my university. I love the environment here. I love my DECA team because they give me such a comfortable environment to be in, and with so much respect and everything. And I feel like I'm at a place where there's nothing that can affect my confidence with who I am because I'm surrounded by such amazing people, and people need to realize that little comments and remarks, like you said, stick with us. And just being in such a comfortable environment has made me so much more confident enough to hold this event, where in the past I could not even talk to a teacher or talk to people at all. And like being in this environment has given me such a raise in confidence in who I am, in my skills of all kind. And people need to realize that these little things build up and they matter so much more than they expected to. And with that, will be moving on to our keynote speaker, Val Walls. So Val brings 25 years of experience in sales, sales leadership, and sales performance development across multiple industries, distribution, retail service management, technology, and most recently, financial. Val joined Scotiabank in August 2017 in a newly created role, Director of Sales Effectiveness. And in addition to their formal role, they are passionate about driving change to create a culture of for greater inclusivity. With that, Val is the chair of for the Global LGBT plus Inclusion Council at Scotiabank and is an active board member for Pride at Work Canada as the director of national strategy.
Yes, thank you. So listen, I was absolutely, intrigued, in awe, inspired, and then also in some ways just kind of like, wow, these stories are still happening. And so thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so open and sharing your lived experience of what you're actually going through. And also, I really appreciated hearing the perspective that you have relative to the corporate world, in terms of like Hamza, needing to be able to represent yourself regardless of your identity. Meagan, you talked about, you'd have to be, what you'd have to accept, and yet you have to just accept how men would treat you. And so I wanted to, just listening to this, I kind of shifted in terms of how I'm going to start this session. We're going to really talk about perspective. Okay. I have, unlike you, I have 5 decades of corporate experience, and you're looking at me now going, oh my God, who invited Val? This is going to be a long talk. So, and honestly, I broke this down into little segments just to give you flavors of my career, not just a career path. I'm not looking at it by, positions that I've had, but really the experience. So I thought I'd break it down for you. And I'll come back to this perspective in a moment, but I'm going to break it down in terms of what did I experience over the 5 decades with respect to corporate rhetoric, okay? Because there's a change, over the decades on that. And then just a high point in terms of the Canadian law, because I believe that reflected that rhetoric. And then I want to share, a piece of my lived experience. And by the way, I am so transparent. I'm open to, any question. If you're respectfully curious, you can hit me with anything. And then the other piece I'll cover off on this, I'm just looking up here in my notes, is my approach, right, with that corporate rhetoric, and then some key guiding principles. So does that sound like a really fair, nice way to move through 5 decades? Okay. Now, but before I do that, I want to touch on something here. Because I just found it amazing to hear the stories here, which really drove to me a calling to talk a little bit about perspective. Because there was really 5 things that showed up for me that I want to give as a gift to those who shared their story today. One is live without apology, and you're going to hear this throughout my stories of my 5 decades. Live without apology. This is not a dress rehearsal. Your life. So you need to be your director and not let others direct how your life will be. That's point number 1. I'm going to start this backwards, okay? You live without apology. And you're going to hear how I've lived into exactly what I'm sharing with you. Number 2, just step up and shake things up. Because to me, and this is how I've been living my life, I got to really shake things up and to cause people to go, what? What are they saying? Because I want to get people's attention. And you know why? The number one reason why I don't mind that people are pointing the finger at me, judging me, talking about me, is because I believe if they need to do that to me, I'm going to be strong enough to take all of that hit so I can protect those who can't actually handle it. And I'm going to go forward to make the difference. So go ahead, talk about me. And throw salt. It's all okay, because this is the other piece it does. The more people in the community or individuals work towards discrediting others, to me, what that shows, it empowers me. And why it does is because this is my perspective. It's really the uneducated that tend to be so disrespectful and have empty opinions, no facts, right? And that's a gift. So when somebody shows up to me, you know, that and listen, we've had politicians hit the street, and I just think, are you kidding me? Fantastic. I love it. If you're stuck in the old way of thinking, you're a gift to me, because now I get to go toe to toe and have an educational session with you, right? It may shift one little thing, it may shift nothing, it doesn't matter, but it takes attention off someone else. The fourth piece I'll share with you, you be you, okay? Because everything story I just heard here today, it really is important. You be you. How people choose to be is not a reflection of you. It just isn't. It's a reflection of them. So someone judges how you identify, judges how you present, judges how you dress. And trust me, I've got lots of stories like that I can share, because I according to society, and that's the construct of, and it really is a societal construct, I present masculine. I don't know what that means. You know, went and bought a watch a few months back, and the woman said to me, "Oh, you know, that's a man's watch." And I held the watch up and said, "Can you show me the penis here? I can't see it." Like, why do we genderize everything? Don't know. So it's like, I'm intrigued with that. That's okay. And it, you know, she was all shocked. Like it's maybe I have a big wrist. Who knows? Maybe I'm going blind. Who knows? But that's the watch I want. And the final piece I'll share with you based on the learnings here. Don't worry, I'm not going to run away, Catherine. You're going, wait a minute, you're going to come in and chat. But no, I just want to start backwards. I want to share with some 5 key points that I really got from our presenters tonight. And the fifth one is, you know, you really step into presenting yourself in the way that you really desire to. In other words, who you are internally, allow that to shine. It's interesting. I know, and you'll hear some stories here. I went through a lifelong lessons of that, of not doing that. And stepping, and my coming out story was 1973. Now you're looking going, wait a minute, you're older than my parents, maybe. But 1973, and stepping up and stepping into being who I be caused all kinds of disruption. But if you're not going to be a disruptor, then what are you going to be? Right? And so being a disruptor, and you've got the gift of going through this education, embrace it. So I wanted to start with those 5 pieces, because what we're talking about in this is really systemic racism, systemic biases. And I heard it was mentioned that we've made progress, and we have come a long ways. Believe me, I don't discount that progress. But to me, progress equals continued growth. We're definitely not finished, and we're not finished until everyone matters, till we're no longer. And what my commentary at work is about on this is that we're not finished until we no longer have to talk about this, where it matters not. So I just want to start with that little gift to you first, and then so I'll now go back to the purpose here to talk a little bit about 5 decades. And trust me, if you raise your hand, we can pause and take questions. If this gets to be too, you want to kind of shift gears, let's do that, okay? So I'm going to start. I just shared with you my coming out, right? So literally, I grew up in a really small town. If you blinked, you missed it. And this is in the interior of British Columbia. So I appreciate, you come in and you immigrate from another country. There's different cultures. There's also different cultures even in Canada, from small town minds, right? And which requires really small steps to help either broaden those small minds, or if you can't actually expand them, then you're actually cast aside. That was my life, cast aside. But all good. Because in my mind, it was like learning to ride, bucking bronc. Okay, that's a wild horse when you're going to break them if you don't know that. And, you get on that horse and my goodness, you're going to get bucked off at some point. But the key about it, and every time I did get bucked off, I grew up in the country on a farm. And, sure, I got kicked. I had, I bled, I got knocked unconscious. But here's the key. It was always about getting back on that horse. And so when I look now at my corporate experience, which really I'll say started in 1980, the corporate rhetoric at that time, it really was this, which is, when I think about it now, it's kind of funny. It's literally you'd have executives saying, "What? There are no queers here." Complete denial. That was really the corporate rhetoric in the 80s, okay? Now, think about what's going on with Canadian law. You know, there was a motion to continue to move forward to change human rights code at that time and remove discrimination with respect to sexual orientation. So think about that. That's the conversation going on politically, the landscape. And so, of course, corporations are stuck in this mindset of denial. So what did that mean for my lived experience? So I'm going to share the story with you in terms of the situation that occurred, okay, the action, and then what was the outcome. So in that particular experience, and I'm only giving you, I'm encapsulating one company because there's no point me in 33 years of employment. There's a lot of companies here because trust me, you're going to get fired a lot. You're going to be that out way back then, which is you get really good at it. So the situation was I was fired. I was fired because there was a suspicion that I was gay. They had a suspicion in terms that I always was out with this one woman. I was actually observed coming out of a club that was questionable. So I was terminated, right? So interesting. Now, how would I know that? How would I know that I got terminated? Because, you know, there's still discussions going on in terms of shifting the Human Rights Act. But here's how I was a bit cheeky. Perhaps I still am. What I did is I actually pretended I was a recruiter. Because I couldn't figure out how could somebody who was such a high performer, generated such high revenues for this organization, literally be terminated. Made no sense to me. So I pretended I was a recruiter. I filled my mouth up with a lot of Kleenex, so changed my voice. I kid you not, this is a true story. And I pretended I was calling to get a perspective because I was looking at really hiring Val Walls, and I named this made-up position, and I got an earful. I got an earful about all this stuff that nobody had ever been honest with me about, that of this perspective that they had, but I was ultimately let go because of this suspicion. Okay, so what did that all mean? When I go and I reflect back on the 80s in the corporate world, I found that, you know, for my own survival, I really was more of an imitator. How can I actually just kind of fit in the best I can, not ruffle too many feathers, but so my guiding principle there really was don't completely speak your truth. Okay, so that really was a whole decade of you know, I would say, you know, I was smothered, okay, and really not stepping into my full true self. Now we shift here because we go into the 90s. Okay, in the 90s, really the corporate rhetoric that from my experience was, you know, I know, let's just not talk about it. I know they're there, these gay people, but let's not talk about it. And yeah, at the same time though, you know, Bill C-33 was being passed on sexual orientation being added to the Human Rights Code. So even though we're saying let's not talk about it, from a corporate perspective, they're having to get into the boardroom and start looking at what does this mean. Now, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll start kind of connecting the dots of some of these companies. And if, you know, in working with some of the, let's just say the less advanced organizations, we're really stuck in the past. So the particular situation I'm going to share with you is that, and this one always just, it does actually make me chuckle because in a lot of ways it was really I would say it was my stepping stone into really discovering how to really be a stronger ally to others and really having a stronger voice for my own self. So here's the situation. Every month, the VP of HR and I, we would go off site. And then what we did on that during that offsite is that we would work through the strategy. Now this particular meeting, and I'll keep in mind, and I'm not actually tooting my own horn, these are just reality. I was also a high performer in this organization. You're gonna think, does Val ever fail? For sure. But in terms of performance, I was actually performing at a high level. So here I was sitting with this, I'll call him a gentleman for the sake of not being rude. And I'm sitting across from him, and we would typically get right into the strategy, okay, from the HR perspective. So it was employee relations and recruitment and training was my area of responsibility. This particular meeting started off a little bit different because at this meeting, this particular VP of HR leaned in and he said, you know, Val, I have to ask you a question before we get going. And it's like, okay. And it was odd. It was an odd way from the position. It was just a different, he was approaching me in a really different way. And so I appreciate your story there, Meagan, because he literally, keep in mind, this is going back into the 90s now. He leaned in, he says, listen, you know, there's a rumor going around here and I just need to verify this. Are you a lesbian? Now, in my head, I didn't identify as a lesbian. So I could honestly say no, because at that point I was struggling to, in my own mind, am I gender nonconforming? Am I trans? Well, who am I really? I'm still going through that kind of process, right? So I said, well, so I said no, but then I leaned in and I said, and this is where this gets really funny. I said, listen, I'm confused. I don't understand why you're asking the question. He said, and he got really firm and he said, I just need you to answer it. Now I knew that my job was being threatened at this point. Remember, I have experience of this one. And I said, so I don't understand. Why do we need to talk about this? And he said, I just need you to answer yes or no. So I took a deep breath and I leaned back. And then I leaned in. And I don't know where I got the, I'd say the courage to do this, but it came. And it was really a springboard for courage thereafter. I leaned in and I said, listen, is my job description changing? And he looked at me and says, I'm confused. Why would you ask if your job description is changing? And I said, well, you're asking me if I'm a lesbian. So I'm just curious. Is my job description changing so that I now have to sleep with women? So he was not impressed with he thought I was being a bit mouthy. And I said, well, that's the only reason you'd be asking this, because otherwise, what relevance does this have to do with my job? So he was pushing the envelope on this one. He said, listen, he said, I am a Christian, the old religious card. I'm a Christian. I run the HR here, and I will not have any faggots and queers in the organization. And he said, if you're not a lesbian, and he passed me this list, he said, here's a list of members, and I was the HR person down at the warehouse, and he said, we believe that and he used this derogatory term again, faggots, and I'm just saying it just because for the sake of the story. And he said, then go out and you investigate and you find out if it's true, and then you have them fired. That's a true story, and that's a career experience in the corporate world. And so the outcome of that was like, I was just horrified. To be candid with you, I was like so taken aback. I pushed the list back and I said, listen, that sounds like it's too big of a job for me. I think it's something for someone like you. The next day I went and met with the president, and I shared with him the whole story, and then I resigned. Now, my approach back then was I wanted to camouflage, right? Because I really needed a job. I was already pushed out from my whole familiar world. I'm from British Columbia, but here I am now. At this point, I'm in Ontario. I'm trying to make my way through life here. So, but I was at the point in terms of a guiding principle, I'm going to test the truth now. Because to be honest, I'm getting a little bit irritated. You know, this is my life too. And it goes back to what I shared with one of my points here is that I'm the director of my life. And I deserve to have the life that I want to live. So I started testing the truth. So now that takes us into, from a corporate perspective, into the 2000s. Okay, so we're now into the a whole new decade, which is kind of exciting because I'm starting to see some things change, and I'm really pushing to live my truth. But here's what I would say the rhetoric that I'm hearing in the organizations at that time for the entire decade is really, okay, we know, but just assimilate. You know, I got really tired of that word. And from a Canadian law perspective, this is the period of time that same-sex was legalized in 2005, right? So we're starting to make some great strides. So the situation in terms of one of my corporate experiences in that decade, I'll share with you, is that I led as I don't want to give the complete. I was an internal consultant, but I would go in and meet with clients, and I was closing some pretty big business. Okay, and so it was a business development role. What had occurred is that one of the customers had not felt overly comfortable having someone like that meeting with them, and whatever that was, right? It really is just how I present myself. So it was decided that I'd be pulled off the customer facing and it'd be probably better operationally. And yet, one of the biggest sales we ever made in that organization was the sale that I did flying into Texas and meeting with 22 of the executive team and selling in on this whole new concept that just came out of my head that I whiteboarded. and close a deal of 500,000 US dollars. Biggest sale they ever had. And yet, based on one customer giving feedback, not comfortable with that, pulled me out. Okay. So, the action is that I was challenged to, to develop a program that I believed could actually drive even greater revenue. Okay. And really sustain the business and take it to another level. And that's what I did. I developed a sales architect that I was able to then take with me from that organization. Because yes, guess what I did? I quit. It wasn't, and so in reality, where my approach at that point in that decade was, I became a rebel. It really, it just really grew on me, and I was, probably to a large extent, I was not very polished of being a rebel. I was just really just giving everything I had. If you don't mind I was just like, I'm just really trying to drive home that point, right? And so my guiding principle was really speak my truth and just take the consequences. Speak my truth and how much more could I lose? It's not like I had family standing behind me. It's not like I was creating a whole new reality for me. So I was quite the rebel. So that was that decade. Right? So now we shift into 2010. 2010, corporate rhetoric. I have to say, there are still some companies that still have this rhetoric, but they are slowly moving away. But here was the corporate rhetoric at that time. We'll focus on compliance, and we're going to check the box. It's all about compliance. Let's not really get into the human soul. Let's not really get into understand individuals. Let's not really do anything to really make a difference. Let's not really drive what D&I is all about. Let's just check the box. Sound familiar? And so when I look at that, at that time, the Human Rights Act and Criminal Code were updated at that time to include sexual orientation and gender identity. And so it was just, a rub was occurring. The more innovative and advanced organizations didn't want to just check the box, but they were struggling with, how do we do this? There weren't a lot of out people. So the situation from my corporate experience, at least one of them I'll share with you, because I have so many. Because again, this is actually in 2010. I showed up at this place of work, and I got a sense that things weren't so comfortable for many people. But in about my 4th month, I was stopped as I was going in to use the facilities, and I was using the women's facilities, and I was challenged. And it was raised, and I was asked not to use that washroom. Now, here, keep in mind how I present for those who have not met me. In the corporate world, I dress with a shirt, it's a men's shirt, a vest, which I've custom made, a tie, and pants. Okay, our society's construct says that's male. Again, I didn't make those rules up. They made those rules up, right? Maybe I'll have a skirt on without that tie and skirt. It doesn't. How I present has nothing to do with my competencies and what's going on and what the value I can contribute. So I refuse to adjust how I present myself in terms of my expression. I was hired dressed this way, but when it came to the point where I was asked not, I was making allegedly, women uncomfortable. So it was time then. I could go in, but nobody else could be there. So little notes would go on the door. They're in there, doing whatever, right? But so it was an odd thing. So it was, highly recommended to me. This is kind of the action here that occurred in this particular situation. It was highly recommended that I start searching for another place of employment, that I wasn't a good fit. I always love that good fit. So what did I do? My outcome here, I kept my head down. I exceeded at my role. And so that my goal was, I'm not going to just walk away. I'm going to leave behind something memorable in terms that would make a difference and an impact on the business, which I did financially for them. And I'll let them pay me out. And that back to the rebel, right? So my approach at this point is that I'm stepping into being authentic. And my guiding principle with that was that just be my truth. And that's why I want to start with, based on what I heard today, because this is really with my big perspective shift, where I'm just going to step in, I'm going to be my truth, I'm going to be authentic, and let the chips fall. Okay? So our final decade that we get to, the final decade, here we are, 2020. Now, here's the corporate rhetoric that I'm hearing today, for the most part, okay? At least at my current place of employment, which we know is with Scotiabank. The rhetoric is, let's lean in. Let's really lean in to learn. Let's lean in, really listen. Let's really lean in to understand. That's very different than anything I've experienced in 33 years. Now, keep in mind, before I get into the Canadian law piece, et cetera, I'm going to pause for a moment. Because I've just shared kind of the highlights of what you kind of get a sense in terms of how my career went and has been going. When I submitted my application for this brand new role at Scotiabank in automotive finance, I'll share with you, I looked at that job description and the title said sales effectiveness. At this point, I've made a name for myself in terms of really being an expert with sales effectiveness and sales enablement. So I was confident to put my name forward for that role. But I have to tell you the truth. When I looked at the job description, literally I went down and went, I don't know what they're talking about here. I can't do that. I know nothing about that. And I literally went through it, and I think I ended up with 3 things with a list of 15, like, okay, I get that. But the point was I didn't care because the title said sales effectiveness. So I thought, forget this, because clearly they don't know what sales effectiveness. I do. I'm going to go in and sell myself. So that's a piece to know. But here's the bigger piece. I invested, and this is so sad, I invested more time speaking to my wife about what will I wear for the interview. Because I passed at the phone interview, I aced. Then I was called in for the panel. And it was a holy shit moment. And it was a holy shit moment because, like, this is a bank. And as my wife said, you're going to have to be really, it's conservative. They don't hire people like you. So this is the conversation we're having at our dinner table. So that was like, oh my gosh, I'm going in for an interview. What will I wear? I just shared with you. I always wear a tie, a vest, pants, dressing up with a blazer. And societal construct makes that male. So it's like, what do I do? So much energy, so much time was invested on what shall I do, because I don't want to be thrown out for the process because of how I express myself, of who my true self is. So but back to what I just shared, being authentic. So I decided, okay, I'll meet this part way. I took the tie off. I still wore the vest. I still wore the pants. I still wore, so I still showed up, and I don't wear makeup. I just showed up that way. And I just thought, oh, okay, I'll take the tie off. But I felt underdressed. I didn't feel as comfortable as I would normally in terms of being my true self. But I thought, okay, that's kind of give and take. But it's interesting, isn't it, that I would invest that much time thinking about who is this company? What are they looking for? It's automotive. My gosh, that's pretty, white male cisgender, right? And here I come along. So I stepped into the interview and I had that mindset, know nothing about what's going on in this job description, but I'm going to go in and sell myself. And that's what I did. With my authentic self, I went in to educate them on what sales effectiveness is about. And the moral story is I got hired, obviously. Now, this is a period of time where literally, there's been no Canadian federal ban on conversion therapy. So there's that kind of dialogue going on in organizations, right? So the situation I'm going to share with you here at Scotia, it's very different. I'm so thrilled how far we've come. And I get there's more, we have to go much further. But, I joined, I'm very out, I'm very vocal. I had a leader walk by me, about 3 months into joining Scotia. And as she walked by me, she looked down, she was tall. So she's looking down at me, she goes, do you always dress like this? And I love to use humor. So I looked at her and said, what, with clothes? I didn't know that was optional. Like, no one told me, it wasn't in my onboarding package. So I just use humor as I go through life, right? So, but here's an organization that observed that I was, willing to put myself out. I was willing to stand out front and center, to truly be an ally for others, to be a voice for others. And I was asked to step into to lead the chair of the Employer Resource Group, which I did, and put a strategy together for Scotia's Pride ERG. I've recently stepped down from that to step up to take on the Global Council of Inclusion for the Pride ERG, for the Pride Council. And here I am in an organization where diversity inclusion is not my full-time job, but I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about educating others. And in particular, when, there's a little slice of pie where somebody just is so confused and unaware, I will step in. So I am very much part of, informally, our diversity inclusions corporate department. They lean heavily in terms of sharing strategy, getting perspective, because they value understanding. They value leaning in. And so the action here, really, in my world now, is that they're seeking my input. They're making a strategic difference, and it didn't happen. And they will tell you, anybody in that DNI, that I'm a big contributing factor to that, because if I'd stayed in the closet, if I'd stayed quiet, it wouldn't have happened. And because others would tell me at Scotia's, aren't you like a little nervous? And I wasn't, because what do you have to lose? Because for me at this point, my outcome is to thrive. It's to be a winner of such as the above and beyond, which is the diversity best practices, presented me with this award this year for my good work of diversity best practice. Yeah, thank you. So I want to just share my truth and to be able to speak for others. And if I don't do it, and if others aren't doing it, then we just stay further back, right? And I'm not suggesting it's easy. I'll give you an example. As I just shared with you, I joined automotive finance, for goodness sakes. And people had the most bizarre questions. Like, I hear you have a kid. So was it like, what, it happened in a test tube? So I just love these questions of complete, ignorance, because it gives the opportunity for me to step in and teach. And so one of the first things I did, and honestly, my wife thought I was going to get fired. I launched a session at Scotia called Everything You Ever Want to Know About a Homosexual But Was Too Afraid to Ask. Now, here's the truth. I don't know much about all of homosexuality. I only have my little lived experience, but I figured, listen, if anybody's coming to that session and if they ask me a question, I can just make it up, because they don't know the answer either. So this absolutely evolved. It was a very popular session, in fact, and it evolved. It evolved to, and I do deliver it, but it's LGBT 101. And it evolved to the point that I was able to partner with IBM and made such a difference in bringing the online ally program globally in 3 official languages. Again, I'm not full-time DNI, but I am full-time in making change and making a difference for all human beings. So that when a team member comes up to me and says, listen, like I heard Hamza say, how, there's all this different kinds of conversation. You don't feel like always included. And people say, well, you got a ring. Are you married? And, this young man is married, but to a man, but too afraid to come out. So having so many people come to me to have these conversations, and now come to me saying, in 3 years, wow, the conversation here is so different. Why is that happening? Because I'm going to stand out and share my truth. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'm going to get fired. But my attitude is, babies aren't dying. To me, that's the worst thing in life that could happen. If a baby dies, me getting fired is not the worst thing that can happen. I'll just, pull up my boots and carry on and find another job. So I want to just kind of walk you through 5 decades. I have, literally hundreds of stories, but I was attempting to pull from stories that I'm hoping resonate for you. But I hope that you glean some insight. We're not all the same. I get it. And, some people say to me, and you may be thinking the same thing. Oh, I can't use humor. Oh, no, I'm not strong enough. I'm not that courageous. I want to tell you, you are. You are. Absolutely. We all are. And until we step into finding our truth, we don't make the change. We just don't. So I know I shared 5 things with you to start off with, but I have top 5 lessons I want to give to you as a bonus. This is a bonus for you, okay? Catherine, do I still have time to share this? Okay. The first one is this. I encourage you all to just be curious. When people show up and they come across ignorant, or they just lean in, just like literally say, I'm really curious. I'm just really curious, what does this mean for you? I'm just really curious. What is you're seeking to understand? And just engage in the conversation non-defensively. No defense, right? Because I'm coming from a place, how might I educate? How might I teach? And even if I don't make a difference with them, I know that conversation, it'll linger and somewhere along the line. And I only know this because I went back, I know you guys are going to fall off your chair here, but 2 years ago, I went back to my 40th high school reunion. Can you believe that? I still can't believe that. Anyway, and back then, 40 years ago, nobody was curious. Nobody gave a damn about me. I was never included in anything. I was a ridicule of everything. And I remember I grew up in a real small town. It was a country school. You know, people carved nasty things. You know, I was not just the butt of jokes, but I was, you know, I was running for my life most of the time because, you know, you get the bigger guys that get a hold of you. You know exactly. Don't have to finish that story. You know exactly what went on. So it was just a whole different time. But going back 40 years later, I wasn't going to have anger. I wasn't going to have resentment. We've come a long ways in this period of time. I was going to show up as myself, and I was going to be proud, and I'm ready to now continue this journey of educating. And it was interesting how that all showed up for people, right? And most people were very apologetic of some of the things that occurred. Not that I needed them to be. It's just one step at a time. This is our journey. So that's number one, be curious. Number two, assess your own biases. Okay, acknowledge them and then take actions to peel them away. We all have them, you know, and it's really easy for me as, you know, a gender nonconforming person to sit back and just say, well, you know, don't judge me for how I'm expressing myself, etc. But then I got to pause, because I'll be honest, I have an unconscious bias. I've actually a conscious bias to a cisgender white male, right? I have to get that in check. Because otherwise, you know, I want to be Rambo. You can't do that legally anymore. So, and I kid you, don't take that. I'm not going to go up and be Rambo. But you got to assess your own biases and understand. Now, I get when I deeply reflect and assess why is that, and I shared a little picture, just a brief piece. You can kind of fill in the gaps of what might have happened to me that would have caused that. But I've got to then get my own biases in check, right? Because I can't make any difference and even be heard if I'm going to be judgmental. So that's number two. Number three, participate. Be part of making a difference in this world. Join corporate ERGs, join events like this. You know, create your own events. Educational sessions are key. You have this gift of even being part of the university. I had to, look, I've been on my own since I was 15. So I had to go back as an adult, and I really value education. I'm so envious that you get to go through school at the, you know, during the right period of time from chronologically. So envious of that, but you cannot do things. And so for me, one of my mottos is Kanai. It's constant and never ending improvement. Kanai. It's a Kanai theory. And so that's such an important piece. When you participate, just constantly look for ways to learn. Number four, with that Kanai, commit to educate others. Listen and find the learning moment. Because if we listen, like to really hear, and we really lean in versus walking away, not just walking away like walking away, I mean mentally, emotionally, spiritually walking away. Pause. Really lean in and listen. Don't walk away, because it takes courage and it takes humor and it takes patience. But when you can listen and really get that one sliver, find that little educational moment. It might just be ever so small of a piece, but it's a difference you can make. And I know now at this age, how many people come back to me saying, well, you know what? You changed my life. This conversation fundamentally changed me, because somewhere along the line, that individual is going to encounter a loved one that may be experiencing something similar to the journey we've walked. It might be their child. And we don't want to be the ones going, I told you so. You should have listened to me 20 years ago. But we want to be the ones that they can then come to. So that's number four. Number five goes very nicely with the first points I shared with you. Live your purpose. Live your purpose, which means for you to define your journey that you're here to walk, not anyone else's. Your purpose is so important, because we're all unique and we all have a reason for being here. And so for me, and I've had this little motto I've lived by, which is TMI MAD. And it drives my partner nuts, because it also requires that I would buy Mentos. And what it stands for is to touch, move, inspire, and make a difference. Touch, move, inspire, and make a difference. And I'll just share something with you, because for years, I would fill up these little jars, and it says touch, move, inspire, right? And on the jar, it says create the possibility. And my goal was, and it still is, I get up in the morning And the first thing I say to myself, how will I touch, move, inspire, and make a difference today? So it sets my intention. At the end of the day, what do you think I do? At the end of the day, I ask myself, how did I touch, move, inspire, and make a difference? And if I didn't touch, move, inspire, make a difference, then it's like, shame on you, Val. Why? What was the barrier? What caused you not to? What do you need to do differently tomorrow? Listen, and when I was younger, I used to get up and say, I better phone somebody. I got to make a difference somehow. But every time I made a difference, I would put one of these white Mentos in a jar. Some of these older jars had somebody's initial on them, and it would just be full of the people that I touched, moved, inspired. I never took them out because it was just a matter of just being able to fill it. So the piece here is to live your purpose. Find what is important to you, what inspires you, what causes your roots to grow deep, because this is your life. You do not want someone directing your life. You are the director. You are the actor. You are the writer. You're the creator. Thank you.
That was amazing. I can easily say that today you did touch, move, inspire, and make a difference. So you will be adding a Mentos to the jar.
Fantastic. I will add one for you for sure.
Yeah, like I think we have to move on to questions now. So I'll open the floor up to everyone on call. You can ask any question you want, anything you're curious about. I encourage you to open your camera and your mic and speak and say the question. But if you feel comfortable, you can always put it in the chat as well.
Don't be shy.
This is not so much of a question, but just more of a comment. Honestly, thank you, Mehregan, Meagan, Hamza, Val. Everything that everyone has said is amazing. And it's something that we can all relate to in some way, shape, or form. And I believe in my lifetime and in my life that we should always educate each other, whether they don't know whether what's right or what's wrong, or they just may not be educated about it. I just think it's important to help each other out to create that better society and be in a society where everyone feels comfortable to show who they are. So I vouch for that 100%, and I can definitely relate. Thank you.
Fantastic. You're welcome.
If you don't mind, I have a question.
Yes, Nick.
I know Hamza was talking about how we have conferences and everything at Ryerson. Is there something that you think we can do to improve our diversity outlook and how we can help people who are struggling to find their identities at these different events, at these different functions that we host throughout, at least in our community at school?
So I want to be clear. So the question is there something that you can do as a group in order to drive greater awareness around inclusivity and diversity with respect to LGBTQ?
Just in regards, I know you're saying how you're giving awards for diversity and everything. What are some strategies that you think we could implement that, yes, would drive greater awareness and drive greater just understanding of people's different communities?
Yeah, it's interesting because in the corporate world, it may be a little bit different than in terms of in the education world. I think that you may have a little bit more, I would say I don't know this to be true, but I'm thinking it may be a little bit more flexibility. So some of the things that you may want to consider is that, so first of all, I'm a real believer of tying in with strategy. Okay, so Nick, in terms of really getting others involved, grassroots great, and the ERG as an example with Scotia was very grassroots. But to get that work done, I had to really have alignment with leadership. So some things to make a difference is developing as your group, is developing what is your strategy around education? What is your strategy in terms of, and I would say it starts just with educating others, and then, but how does that actually drive, I would say dovetail into Ryerson strategy? So a difference that perhaps, like, do you have a D&I survey that goes out? Do people at Ryerson, students, are they already invited to be able to submit in terms of when they apply at Ryerson to submit their pronouns? Is that, so it's kind of looking for what that edge is of what's not happening. And I don't know if that is occurring at Ryerson, but if it's not, that's a great place to start. So that if you can get one little action item that can tie to the strategy, then it starts to snowball, because this is an initiative that came from the grassroots. Okay. A second piece then is just, if you want to get more into the grassrooty piece, is getting that kind of approval to be able to do a broader survey in terms of where people, so it's anonymous, where people are struggling when they talk about diversity. You're going to find it's probably really basic. Like, people just don't even understand what's all the talk about inclusion. Of course, you're sitting here at the table and it's, yeah, but I don't get to speak, right? So that's another piece that at least that I did. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing is just running sessions like this. So I was really blessed to be able to moderate a session with Chris Mosher. So it's tacking it to, tying into other folks who are willing to come in and support you. Like, Chris Mosher is the first trans Olympic athlete, and he came in and I moderated a session. But I was conscious when I organized that to bring people to the table who needed to change. So it was HR people who had no idea, recruiters, folks from benefits, versus people who are like-minded. I'm not driving change. It feels good, right? But I'm not driving change. So when you're having events, what can you do as students to be able to get the right people into the room, to cause them to be uncomfortable, to challenge in terms of how do they look at their class? I mean, what is the diversity of the professors? That's an interesting piece itself. So finding an area that you can say, we want to actually be making a difference, and start breaking down some of these barriers and start having dialogue. Is D&I even spoken about in all the classes? Could it be? Why not? Does that give you a sense of it really is pushing boundaries is really what I'm talking about. And until we push boundaries and do some real paradigm shifting, we don't make change. For me, it was starting off with something shocking. Everything you want to know about a homosexual, but was too afraid to ask.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was great.
You're welcome. And I apologize. I just took the answer. Like, I didn't know if that question was directed to me. So, and I know we have other speakers here today. So next time I'll wait till it's directed. My apology. I tend to just take over.
Yeah, it was for anyone to answer.
Hi, Val. So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were growing up, were there people that you looked up to because they were open about their sexuality?
Yeah, I love that question, Eric. So there was no people who I looked up to that was open to sexuality, but there were a lot of animals. As I said, I grew up on a farm, and it was very, very white outside of the reserve. And so there were, and when I tell you it was small, if you blinked on the Yellowhead Highway, you absolutely missed where I grew up. And so the answer to that is no. There was nobody I looked up to, because when you grew up in the country, it's really limited of what you even have access to. I would walk for miles to go to this little trailer that we had, and we called it the library. And I remember sitting in this little tin box, and it had didn't have thousands of books, but had books. And and it would rain, it would leak, and you'd push the bucket around catching it. And I would absorb, so Pierre Trudeau became one of the men I was fascinated with, primarily because, all the poems that he'd memorized. But in terms of the LGBTQ, there wasn't anybody, because locally it was a taboo. It was an absolute taboo. Like, when I came home from that library, this is a funny little library story, and I did that long hike, it was like 9 miles back to the farm, and I walked went to the mudroom, walked up into the kitchen where my mother was sitting there sipping her tea with her proper little saucer and cup. And back then I didn't have any words for how I was feeling and who I was, and so I'd read about lesbian. And so I came home and I said, Mom, I figured it out. I'm a lesbian. And she dropped her teacup and she goes, where did you learn a word like that? And I said, at the library. And she said, you are never going back to that library. And I remember stomping my feet and go, great, now I'm going to grow up to be a stupid lesbian. So I didn't have another person, but what I had is the love of animals. And I'm not being tongue in cheek with this. Animals didn't judge who they snuggled up to. The cows, they didn't judge So I didn't have, it wasn't until much later as I stepped out, and I struggled because, I had to go out and work on my own because I just shared, I was out on my own for a long time. And so it wasn't like I was seeking likeness. It wasn't until 86 when I packed up my car and I decided to take a drive. And my goal was looking at, I had highlighted the map of the Yellowhead Highway, and it sat on my on the passenger seat, and I had strapped everything that I owned, at the top of the roof, which I had a makeshift roof rack, and I decided to drive as far as this car would go. That was the goal. When this car dies, I guess that's going to be my home, because I needed money and I needed to find a job, and I wasn't wanted anywhere. So it broke down in Toronto. And it was exciting because then you ask, did I have any role models? Well, I'll never forget it. Here I was walking down, the city, and going, oh my God, I recognize me. There's people here that look like me. And so I didn't even have time to breathe to find somebody that I admire. I was just so inward, taking steps on, hanging on to words such as, Gandhi or Anthony Robbins. It was more of, what do I need to learn to drive my spiritual path, to have an inner strength to do what I need to do? And survival was the first thing. I needed shelter, and I needed food, and I needed to be able to find a way to continue what I was passionate about, and that was to learn. So I wanted to be able to go back to school. That was a long, convoluted answer to telling you not one particular person.
Yeah, I can agree with that one, because growing up with in a conservative community and everything, even though I had media and stuff, there wasn't really anyone for me to look up to in a way that, first of all, I didn't even know what I was for so long, who I was, and everything I will find is actors who are straight in movies and everything, who I've never seen them talk about or anything. And for me, I saw this picture of this gravestone that said, the U.S. Army gave me a medal for killing 2 men and a leaf for loving one. And that has stuck with me ever since,
That's good, yeah.
because that has been how can anyone give you a medal for doing something that can be defined with hate, and make fire you for loving something, when your only job in life is to love everything, love people, love animals, love nature, love Mother Earth and everything. So that really stuck to me, because the life I want to live is a life of love, and as far away from the path of hate as possible. And it shouldn't matter to anyone how I do it or what I do, as long
Sure.
as I'm a good person, as long as I love who I love and I love everyone, and I don't have hate in my heart, or something boiling inside. And people shouldn't expect me to hate something. People shouldn't expect me to love something. It is up to me to decide, and I'm gonna do what I want to do and love who I want to love, because if I want to create a life worth living, I will.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that and concur. And Eric, just kind of add a little bit more, color to that question, is that I guess, the reason I can't just kind of specifically say an individual that, was my role model, I looked up to and admired. I'd say that it's because, and if my mother were here, she'd be saying the same thing. And teachers that I reconnected with who said, oh, we knew that you were different from the time that you were 8. And it's because I really had this inner burning drive to just be me. And when I looked out at the landscape as a child of what was in front of me, it wasn't about me mimicking anything outside of just learning to be a better rider. Could I do as well as my example of my father on when breaking a horse? So he was certainly he was somebody I admired in terms of being able to ride more effectively. But in terms of LGBTQ specifically, zero, because for me there's always been as I've gone through my life, there's been a disappointment. As you start peeling back, everybody's just human, right? And so I've just made a conscious choice and decision that it's not about me looking for who I can admire, because it tended to be more of what I desired to have or towards goal versus the admiration. As an example, I really want to be able to have a car. I really want to be able to, have, a home, right? So that would be more an admiration, because how did these people get these things? So I want to kind of follow that path. But from an LGBTQ, no, because as I got older, I found that people were either so radical that, wait a minute, you're going to tick everybody off, and I don't want to be part of that. I mean, I still ride my motorcycle as part of the Dykes on Bikes, even though I don't necessarily identify as Dykes, but I like to support that. And, I don't want to be so radical that I'm polarizing, but I want to be, individual and unique enough that it's welcoming for people, for me to be a role model. So I'd say that's more of what's been driving me, Eric, is that how can I walk this world so people can go, hey, you're pretty confident and you're pretty comfortable in your own skin. Tell me a little bit more about that. Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit more to that versus just shutting that down of no role model. Because as I listened to it, I thought, that sounds a bit arrogant. It wasn't intended that way.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
You're very welcome, Eric.
Hi, I also have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering, what's the best way, in your opinion, because everyone's different, to be an ally for someone within the community? Just because growing up, I think the earliest someone came out to me was like the age of 12, and just growing up in my life, a lot more people came out to me. So at the time I was educating myself more, but like you said, like, you don't necessarily know the entire story of someone until the moment that they come out to you. They have so much of a story that they haven't told you yet. So what do you think is the best way to be able to be there for them in a way that's comforting, but you're not overbearing in a sense?
I love that question, Helen, and I really appreciate your sensitivity in terms of how you want to approach that. So, kudos to you on that. So, what I'd say to that, Helen, is that you're right. Everyone has a different lived experience, and there's always layers. You peel it back of people's story, and in terms of people's level of comfort and readiness. So the first step, from in my mind, from an allyship, is that it's not so much as where people are at. First step is in terms of where are you in your own mind, so that people can actually see how you be in the world. People can see how you be as an ally. First and foremost, as an example, I talk about allyship in terms of being able to stand beside people and walk the journey, as you're doing right here. Sometimes you're standing in front and you're blocking, when things are not right, and to help make change. And other times you have to stand behind and really support people to go forward. So, but the first step is just being able to model being an ally. So it might be that you respectfully ask somebody, do you mind me asking, because I want to be respectful of all individuals, what are your preferred pronouns? And just by starting that I know that, like you're living as an ally. You may put that in if anybody receives an email from me, it's on my signature line, right? They, them. So that anybody out there and will know, okay, this is an ally. So I want to model just my living as an ally. And so if I'm in it, and so the second piece of that is that when I'm in public, and if someone is not being respectful, whether it's from a marginalized group or just in general, that I'm going to stand in front, and you're going to hear me make a comment that, excuse me, that's not acceptable, right? And I can't, support you having that kind of dialogue. Or there may be someone says, that I really want to go to this event, but I don't know, I'm really nervous, and maybe they're not ready to tell you why. Just leaning in as I'll say, hey, I don't know what it's all about, but you're my friend. I'll do it with you. Why don't we go together? So then you're standing behind, right? And you're walking that journey. And eventually the layers come down. Does that give you something to think about, Helen, in terms of in front, beside, behind, and then just modeling allyship in how you be as you're doing here?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to say it, because me and Nick just really want to be able to support like anyone within our community and within our student group as well. We're just constantly trying to find different ways to be allies for any different type of community. So that was really appreciative. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I actually have a comment. I attended the first speaker series too, and Jordan was the speaker, and it was for Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
And I just love what you just said, where it's about being in front to saying no when something's wrong, and then you stand behind to empower, and you are allied by standing next. And I think that kind of transfers over, not just for the LGBTQ community, but really for a lot of different groups and people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's excellent advice. Like, take to heart.
Oh, thank you, Megan. Yeah, it's true. When we talk about ally, and particularly when I speak about allyship, it is not just for LGBT. We are all human. And I, in my place of employment now, I talk about the human to human interaction. It's because that's really what we got to, in my mind, peel away from the marginalization and just talk about we're all human. And if I'm respectfully curious and loving and caring, I can just get to touch someone's heart, connect the heart and mind from a human to human perspective, and that takes you a long ways. And then any differences, because you're going to see more similarities that way than differences. And when we have this topic, we're typically peeling back differences versus seeking for the similarities. Great questions.
I have a question for Val.
Matthew, I'm here.
Oh. Did you see any direct effect in the corporate world when federal legislation for gay rights and trans rights happened? And what do you see the future of LGBT rights in the corporate world being in terms of moving it forward?
Yeah, so the question is, did I see any direct impact in the corporate world with the trans rights movement from a legislation perspective? And what do I see?
With all the gay rights, gay marriage, adoption.
Yeah, I sure
like all
did.
of them.
Yeah, exactly. I did, Matthew. And that's why, it's part of this session I was talking about in decades, and the rhetoric of the organizations changed. Like, it went from the 80s, as I shared, of what, there's no queers here, to the 90s is that, yeah, let's just not talk about it. So there are changes in the corporate world because of what's been going on with legislation, and now I can speak from an FI perspective, because I can't speak for some of those other organizations that I used to work with that are still, they'll get out of the cave sooner or later. But some of the changes are that look, we've changed the benefits for our, and we've been supporting our trans employees for full transition. So there are some major changes that are occurring within the corporate world, and I think FI is leading the way on that. And so where do I see this in the future? I'm not psychic, but I'll tell you what I desire. I desire that, when we talk about, and it still is a big piece here right now, like, how many people of color do we have at level 8? How many, do team members who are VPs who are Black, or how many women are level 7 and 8? So there's lots of pieces around our Black team members, and women. And that's kind of goes back to this compliancy piece. What I desire, actually, and I think that this will be, I'm going to call this out as a future piece, is that we stop referring to and classifying just women, like when we start focusing on the marginalized groups of women in different positions, that it's cisgender. Like and look, talk about being bold and a rebel, as I talked about in terms of how I am. I was in a meeting not too long ago, and it was all about, creating, the career path for women at the different levels. And I asked the question, what defines a woman? And it was really interesting. It's like, here we got all our cisgender, very white executive, like, what is Val asking? But what I'm asking is, what defines a woman? So, because automatically our trans women aren't included in that. So what I see, and I see, or is my hope, is that, back to earlier, that we don't have to have conversations to help educate people, but that we get to be. That when we talk about our trans team members, that they aren't excluded, but they're just part of. Why are we even calling that out? This is Tamara. This Tamara is a woman as part of our team. Why do we say this is Tamara, who's a trans team member? Like, it just, why did we have to say that? What, right? So I think that we're, at least in Canada, we're moving towards that path where I know Hamza used the word, normal. I try to stay away from the word normal, but it's just, that we all are part of the human race, and that isn't a race to the top. We're just part of the human race sharing a lived experience. And I don't know, if Matthew, if that's giving you what you're looking for in an answer about the future, but it's kind of see it from a trans perspective. Matthew left the building like Elvis, dropped the mic and was gone, asked the question and hit the road. Well, come on back, Matthew, if that satisfied your appetite. If not, we'll go again. This is now a radio show.
Doesn't look Elvis.
Exactly. It's fun. I love looking at all these pictures. I've got this all set up so I can see everybody, and it's like the Brady Bunch. You remember that? You wouldn't, because you. I want to just like lean up. Hey, hi, Nick. Good night. Sorry, you're getting me after hours, and I know I'm ADHD, and this could go anywhere.
Does anyone have any final questions before we end off?
My apologies, Eric.
No problem.
Can I be so bold, guys? I love being bold. It's why I've gotten that comment in the past. Val, you're amazing. And during the conversation, like Mehregan and myself, and we're like talking within our group, we would love to do something like that, where we have ask a question to, you tell us, what's the best title? Ask any question you wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would love to invite you to like be part of that event, and then Decca, we're taking over. We want you to collab with us. And we would love to do that for Ryerson. I think that's such an excellent idea. Like some of the things you were saying, like I'm totally one of those people that love strategy as well. And like my mind's tinkering. I love where you said, we can't, when Nick asked the question, like, what can we do? It's more about you have to be strategic of what your goals are trying to be. And I think one of the big things about being inclusive at Ryerson, I think we should, approach Ryerson and find out how is there a way we can have everyone add your pronouns to their email addresses as something starter, because I think you're writing your email back to somebody, identifying them the way they want to be identified, would only empower Ryerson more to be that school that, as Hamza said, you feel included and part of the community and not ostracized for being who you are. There was an article I shared within our group. I'm sure some of you guys who, when we were organizing, CBC released recently that Ontario specifically, there's been a lot of students speaking out that they don't feel accepted in some of the top universities or the top universities in Ontario. Yeah. And you know what, I do not have that feeling at all at Ryerson, but I attended York for a short time. And yes, I did feel like we're at York University. You do feel sometimes like I have to like fit a certain role so like I can make friends, because if I don't, I'm just going to be alone by myself the whole time.
Well, you know what? Drive change, make a difference, right? And you know what the beauty for Ryerson? That's a competitive edge.
Yeah.
Right? And a competitive edge will just attract more students. Like-mindedness, absolutely. And so yes, anything any of you want to do, I'm there to support you.
Yay.
100%.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're so happy. We're definitely going to organize that. I think it would be something that'd be valuable to the entire student community. It's such a topic too to get people excited. At least it got me super excited right away.
Good.
You know? Yeah.
Well, that's great. Touch, move, inspire, make a difference.
I wrote it down because I'm going to steal it.
It's yours.
I'm going to add you, like, you know what, creator, all proceeds go to you.
That's great. I have so enjoyed this conversation. So I truly appreciate, I'm so honored that you invited me to your second conversation series. And I look forward to supporting you all in the future and wish you only the best as you go through with your education.
So as we conclude our event, I want to give a special thank you to Meagan, Mehregan, Hamza for sharing something that's not always the most comfortable thing to share with a bunch of strangers. And a big thank you to Val for joining us, taking the time out of their day. And thank you for everyone who attended and stayed this late. I know we ended a little bit later than anticipated, but I hope it was well worth it for you. And I hope you can take something away from this conversation.
You're all a gift to me. I'm taking tons. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Amazing. Woo.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.